Hello, welcome to another video or podcast if you're listening on podcast from lightspeedstats.com. And today we're going to talk about gender in horse racing, how it can affect horse racing, how it can affect your results. And I'm going to show you on the software and talk you through how you can actually look at this stuff and most importantly, obviously import it into your own personal Betfair trading on horse racing. So, welcome back. We're going to dig into this topic because I actually think it's massively overlooked. And gender was something that I think I overlooked as well back in the day, but it's something that's well worth a look. I'm going to explain why. I'm also going to explain what the horse genders are because it is quite complicated. It can be quite confusing, but obviously once you know what they are, you know what they are. Most punters spend hours on form, track conditions, trainer stats, but very few actually stop to ask this: does gender matter in horse racing? And the answer is very simply yes. So let's start with the horses themselves. Now, male horses usually are called colts and geldings. And I'll bring you over to the gender selection on the software. So if you look over here, and obviously for your podcast, I'll talk you through this anyway. But basically, you can select horse gender from the master group rules. It's under horse metrics, as you might expect. And when you select horse gender, you'll actually see there's quite a few options here. I'm going to talk about colts and geldings first. So a colt is an uncastrated male horse under 4 years old, okay? And a gelding is a male horse of any age that's been castrated. Now you might wonder, well, why have you looked at those differently? You know, they're not really, I mean, in a traditional sense as we see gender, they're not really different genders, are they? We wouldn't necessarily call a man who's being castrated not a man anymore. But of course, with this, it does make a bit of a difference. And that's why you've got the option. Now, obviously, you could just select both if you wanted to look at both, or you could select one or the other and kind of compare the differences. I'm going to show you in a bit and talk you through how you can look at the results and then determine what's working and what's not based on gender. But that's basically the difference. They're kind of the two main ones. Then there's another one here called ridgeling, right? Now, I didn't even really know much about ridgeling. Obviously, you hear of colt and gelding quite a lot. So I looked this up, and ridgeling is a male animal, typically a horse, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a horse, but in this case it will be on the horse software, that has one or both testicles undescended from the scrotum. Okay, sounds not very pleasant, I'll be honest. Now, I don't know much about horse genitalia, so maybe it isn't that bad for them, but it certainly doesn't sound like it'd be something particularly pleasant for a human being. But apparently this leads to quite a lot of testosterone production, so the horse can be quite angry, I guess, a lot of the time. But anyway, you've got that as an option, and that's what I like about the Lightspeed Stats software, is that you've got so many options you can use. You could just use one here, you could look at them all, compare them, whatever you wanted to do. But there's also there's the horse category, which is just horses, obviously. Then we've got two more here, which is mare and filly. Okay, so you might be able to guess here that a mare and a filly are female, given that the others are male. Okay, so a young female horse is called a filly. This is typically under the age of 5, and in UK horse racing. Now, these kinds of things, they can be a little bit, people change their minds on some of this stuff here and there. But that's what a filly is in typically, and it's what it will be in the stats software. And then a mare is a female horse that's 5 years or older. So a little bit easier for the females, not too many differences there. And again, I guess this is kind of, maybe you could see it as the girl and woman thing, right? That's kind of what we're looking at here, with the difference of the filly being the girl, mare being the woman, if you look at it in that way. Obviously, horses aren't people, but I'm just trying to give you a kind of simile to give you some information on that. But again, this is interesting information, right? Because a lot of this stuff, I don't think a lot of, even maybe punters who punt on horse racing will necessarily know this stuff. So it's a really good thing to learn, and it's a really good thing to look at. But the next thing I really want to look at here is how can we actually use this in horse racing, and how can we use this in our strategies. So I'm going to select a strategy from the strategy bunker. Now, if you've got the Lightspeed Stats software, this is just the part of the software where you create a strategy, and you'll have your strategies saved here once you save them. But if you don't have the Lightspeed Stats software, well, obviously you won't know what that is, but you can see on the screen here, if you're listening on podcasts, I will explain the steps I'm taking. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select a strategy, which is going to be the Dobbs strategy. Okay, so we're going to look at Dobbs here. Now, this is a strategy that I've looked at that does well, but it doesn't have gender in yet. So this is the reason I've chosen this. And then what you're going to want to go down to here is betting rules, the third option, and then click customize results. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to get it to look at gender for us in theory. So if we click on the breakdowns option, and as you'll see when I click on this, it gives you lots of options. You're just going to we'll get rid of month and year because we don't need that. We're literally only going to look at gender. Remember, gender is in horse metrics, so that will be where it is. There it is. And we select that. Okay, very simple. And we're just going to run the strategy, okay, and get the results up. And what this is going to do is it's going to actually show us the results of the strategy with the genders. So we're going to look at the differences between all the genders, which is really interesting, right? Because this will actually help give us quite a clear idea about which gender works well for this strategy. Okay, so we've got a few charts here. I don't tend to worry too much about these charts when I'm just looking at one outcome, unless it's profit, then you'll see why. So here we go. We've got the options here, and we've got the results here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to compare these to what obviously we know the horses are, and then talk a little bit about that for you, especially if you're listening on podcasts, so you understand. So the first option here we've got is C, which obviously stands for Colt, and that is £1.56 points profit, or 1.56 points profit, however you want to say that, okay? Slight ROI, 58 trades. Not a ton of trades, interestingly, so hard to draw any definitive conclusion there. Interestingly, fillies have actually lost money. 800 trades, they're about 17 points down. So, we could look at this and go, okay, so maybe young female horses aren't as suitable for dobbing. Certainly not in this strategy. Now remember, things can change strategy to strategy, so you'll want to test this on your own strategy. But it's interesting to note the differences, right? That's 785 trades. We've got quite a good idea here that this isn't really profitable, that amount of trades. Now, maybe over the next few trades it gets towards evens, whatever. I wouldn't have a massive issue if you wanted to take fillies out based on these results. Again, it would have given you 16 points more profit had you done that from the start. Now, obviously, with geldings, they've done well. They're actually the best one here, as you can see here, 87.97 points up for geldings, which is good. And again, and this is the interesting thing, right? Maybe this is giving us a bit of information here, right? Because we know, right? We know that a gelding is an older horse, right? Well, in theory, might be an older horse, but it's a castrated one. So we know that these are castrated horses, okay? Maybe they'll be a little bit older. They're certainly going to be, on average, older than the Colts, right? Who are going to be under 4 years old. So, they're going to be young. And it's interesting that the two young groups have performed the worst. Now, does this make some sense? Probably. Consistency. Think about it in people, right? If you're younger, these kids, they can act in wildly inconsistent ways. Adult lives, it's much more structured. You're kind of used to your routine more, things like that. If you ever seen young children, I've got 2 at the moment, you'll fully understand exactly what I mean there. So that's interesting, right? And not a ton of trades, like say for Colts, but fillies. But there's a little pattern that's clearly developed there. ROI 5.94%. Gelding's really solid. We're going to ignore the horse category. And we're just going to look now finally at the mare category, which is 66 points up, 13% ROI. Actually the best performing of the lot. So, the female horses really doing really well in terms of ROI. 500 trades, so a decent amount there. And we can see that we've got a lot of data here, right? Now, you can now go back to your strategy and go, well, moving forward, maybe I'm going to take fillies out. You could take colts out, going, well, they're not making enough money. There's not a ton of trades on those anyway for these dobs, so it's not going to make much of a difference whatever you do there. But quite clearly, the younger horses do not perform as well as the older ones. And in the terms of the male horses, the castrated ones do a hell of a lot better. Is that it? Do we perform better if we're castrated? Probably. If we were castrated, I think men would probably get a lot more done, probably make a lot more money. Definitely have a lot less children to pay a lot of money for. But there you go. That's gender in horse racing. Hopefully I've explained. I mean, because I guess the main point of this is I want to explain what gender is and how to use it in your strategies. And it's quite clear how you can do that. You can look at the results using the Lightspeed Stats software. You can break down what works and what doesn't in your trading. And hopefully, that will help you improve as a trader. Because I feel like, again, I want to look at a lot of these different categories. I'm going to do different videos on different categories. And I feel like the gender is one I wanted to do first because I think it's so overlooked. But it does have an impact on horses and horse racing, just like many other things do. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video or podcast, depending on where you're watching or listening to it. If you haven't tried the Lightspeed Stats software, we're currently running a half price first month offer. Okay, so it's well worth going over to lightspeedstats.com, just checking it out. You can get a really cheap half price first month, and you can see the power of the software. Obviously, there's a lot of software out there for horse racing charging a lot more money than we do, and you can see that we're probably better. Look at this. We've got the back testing. We've got this kind of data. It's kind of scary good how good it is. I absolutely love it, and I'm using it all the time. All right, everyone. Hope you have a great week. And most important of all, hope you make some money trading those horses on Betfair.